As Joan alluded to in her opening address there, you can hear that there's some major initiatives underway. They're all part of the Measurement Innovation Program, or the MIP, which we launched this year to look at how we can investigate the next iteration of your radio ratings system by taking an evidence-based approach. So my role here today is to give you a bit of background to how we came to the initiatives that we're going to be launching next year as part of the MIP. What was the rationale behind those initiatives? And I forgot my clicker. But before I do that, and Joan mentioned this as well, we really enjoy working with your industry. I think the radio industry is a really exciting industry. It's full of creative and talented people. Unfortunately, I can't say that's true of every industry that I've ever worked with, but yours certainly is. It's a lot of fun. You've got celebrities. It's a great industry. But having said that, when I look around this room, I'm sensing something. I'm sensing something's not quite right still. Like a repressed desire, as Freud might call it, or an unmet need, blocked wish, something like that. I can feel it. And I think what I'm sensing in all of you, or some of you, is that as fun as radio is, a lot of you are actually dying to leave that glorious industry and come and join the glamorous industry of market research. So, I don't know if I'm right about that. But for those of you who I am right about, today's your lucky day, because I want to briefly swap positions with you, just for a second. Just indulge me here for a moment. So pretend you're me. Okay, so you're a market researcher. I'm going to have to rely purely on your powers of imagination here. So maybe just close your eyes and think about a lot of numbers and data and analysis and questionnaires, all the things you've been fantasizing about working with for years. And so welcome to GfK. Your first task is to design a radio ratings system. And it needs to be fit for today, as well as the future. How would you do it? How would you all go about designing such a measurement system? It needs to be representative. It needs to be a currency you can trade on. We need to capture radio listening, which, as Joan pointed out, happens not only at home, but a lot of it happens out of home, across many devices, some devices that the person who's listening doesn't even own. We've got lots of different broadcast mechanisms as well, AM, FM, DAB+, streaming. How do you do that? Now, if I had the time to ask each of you to give me your opinion, I'd get a variety of responses, I'm sure you'd agree. And it's great, you know, we all have opinions, nothing wrong with that. But the problem with opinions, of course, is that they can be very subjective. So with the MIP, and we talked about this last year at the conference as well, we want to ensure that wherever possible, we are not led by opinion, but we are taking a more scientific approach and following the principles of the scientific method, basically. What does that mean when we apply it to radio audience measurement and your ratings system here in Australia? Well, if we're trying to follow the core principles of the scientific method, firstly, it means we start with an observation. It can be very general, such as the one you see here. Portability and ubiquity of radio make it very hard to measure, but we've got a lot of different options for doing so. We've got diaries, we've got different meters, and now we've got also a growing library of streaming data as well. Next step in the scientific method, after you've made your observation, is you get a little bit more specific. So now we look to see, okay, what kind of questions does this raise? So here's an example. How would radio audience measurement evolve in Australia? How should it evolve? What would be the best way for that to evolve? Third step, after you've come to this point in the scientific method, and it doesn't necessarily have to follow this sequence, but this is fundamental and is always there. It's a defining feature of it. You need to formulate a hypothesis. That hypothesis has to be testable, so it needs to be able to be falsified, or you need to be able to find support for it. So it can't be something like the alignment of the planets determine my career or love life success. Can't be anything like that, but it can be something like we've got here. So a hybrid RAM methodology that incorporates multiple ways of measurement would deliver a more holistic measurement for radio listening by maximising both completeness and granularity. That's an example of a falsifiable hypothesis. Once you've got your hypothesis, then it's on to the testing, or as we call it in market research, pilot research or pilot studies. You can see there we've already done quite a few in Australia using a number of different methodologies. Part of the testing process afterwards, of course, is to analyse the data. What happened? What were the results? So we found when we did our eDiary study in 2013, for instance, that the results were comparable to the paper diary, which gave us the confidence to launch a blended diary survey for the industry around 4 years ago now. And you now have 30% of that survey blended with eDiary and 70% with paper. The other thing we have found in the other pilot studies that have been done in Australia so far is that both of the different electronic meters that we have investigated have reported back incomplete levels of listening due to either technical limitations or respondent compliance issues. However, they have also both reported very comparable patterns of listening compared to the diary. Final step in the scientific method is to then look at the results and what are the implications of them, relating back to your original hypothesis, your observation, and your question. When we look at the testing we've done here in Australia so far, we still don't have the confidence we feel we need to make a substantial change to your methodology at this point. And that's a very important step, so we want to be sure. So further testing is needed, and this is part of the whole rationale behind the MIP. Another thing that we're also acutely aware of is that streaming data now is a significant data set that has a lot of potential we haven't explored. So if further testing is needed, let's go back to step 4 briefly. We did that at the beginning of this year. So we looked at some streaming data. We analysed some streaming data from your industry app, and then we looked at that and compared it to the diary data. And very similarly to the electronic meters, we saw an incomplete account of listening once again. I mean, streaming data, of course, it makes sense. It cannot account for all listening. Just because you stream radio doesn't mean that's the only way you consume radio. So we did see evidence of that. But similarly, when we actually looked at the pattern of listening, here we've got the total diary across a 24-hour day from left to right. You can see there that it follows the usual peaks and troughs that you'd expect to see in the morning and the afternoon. When we impose the streaming data on top of that, you can see there are some differences, but overall the pattern stays very consistent. If we then look at the split of the diary data, but only include the people who told us that they listened via the internet, so the streaming listeners, we close the gap even further. So again, we're seeing further evidence for an integration, the same as we saw with the electronic data that we've collected from the meters in the other 2 pilot studies. So if we quickly sum up all of the pilot studies that have been done so far, you can see them up there. The fact is that they have all been done across quite a time range now. So unfortunately, as useful as they were on their own, collectively, the results are not really comparable. If we want to build a statistical model, a hybrid model for radio, we simply don't have the robustness in the sample and also enough crossover in the different devices that we've used to measure radio to confidently move ahead. And that's why we have devised a rather ambitious plan. Instead of conducting further, smaller, iterative studies in, say, 1 or 2 markets at a time, using one of the different measurement tools at a time, we're going to launch next year what we're calling a super pilot. So as Joan mentioned, to the best of our knowledge, this is the largest pilot of its kind that we're aware of, certainly in Australia, and I'm not aware of anything bigger than it worldwide. It's going to be national, so it won't be in 1 or 2 markets like some of the other pilot studies we've done in the past have been. So it will be across all 5 major metropolitan markets: Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide, Perth. In addition to that, we will be looking at all 3 different measurement techniques. So each respondent will be asked to install the app meter, wear the watch, complete the diary simultaneously. So we'll have a single source of data in order to be able to then also incorporate the streaming data and see how that might be able to be factored into all of this, to finally arrive at a statistical model that would produce a hybrid result, as I said before, with the end goal of our hypothesis being to see whether or not this kind of hybrid model will deliver a system that maximises completeness as well as granularity. So that's what we're planning to do with the Superpilot. It sounds a little bit crazy though. I mean, are people really going to do that? Are they going to be okay with installing the app and wearing the watch and completing the diary all at the same time? We've never tried anything like this before. What happens if it doesn't work? What happens if halfway through the field work we realise, you know what, our sample sizes just aren't coming through. We're not going to have the data we thought we would. So in order to avoid a situation like that, we decided to invest in a mini pilot to protect the much larger investment of the Superpilot that's going to happen next year. So we got together 4 large focus groups across the main radio age breaks, and we explored the respondent experience to see whether or not this was actually a feasible thing for us to be considering. Will people accept the tasks? Will they then comply after accepting? We also have a unique opportunity with this kind of study to look at their different preference. What will their commitment be long term? And finally, what kind of incentive will we have to pay them? Here are the results. Firstly, acceptance wasn't that much of an issue. People enjoyed the study. They found it interesting. They liked contributing and being a part of something that might one day form a new ratings system. Very similar to what we see with the diary feedback. People enjoy participating. It's interesting research compared to, sadly, a lot of the other market research that we ask respondents to participate in. Compliance, a lot of the tasks, when you look at them collectively, they sounded overwhelming, but in reality, they were a lot easier. So at the beginning, people felt, oh, that's a lot. But after actually doing it for a week, they felt like it was actually not as bad. 2 of the tasks are, after all, passive. When we then look at the 3 different types of measurement tools, the diary they found to be very comprehensive. They could control the data that they were actually delivering to us. Initially, the instructions were a little overwhelming, but similarly to the tasks overall, this wasn't the case once they were actually in it and used to it. The wearable meter, they liked wearing the watch. They enjoyed that. The step counter that is now integrated in the latest version of the watch was a bonus. They did have some privacy concerns and sometimes forgot to charge it, but overall it was an enjoyable experience. With the app meter, it was easy to install. They don't have to do anything. It was a good experience for Android users, less good for iOS users. Apple has some different regulations with regards to any app that just made that UX not as good. It was more privacy, it did raise more privacy concerns than the wearable meter, and was also a bit more disruptive because of the iOS issues. There was also a perceived battery drain. We've done lab tests. I do think that there is some battery drain, but it was probably exaggerated by the people and their awareness that there was something running in the background 24/7. So we have also prepared a video for you, which I'm going to play in a moment. One thing I want you to pay attention to in the video is all the different types of compliance moments that are created when people take the watch off, turn off the app, or have the phone away from them. Human beings generally are not that good at always complying with things, whether it's about, you know, not using our phone while driving. This guy's got 2. Voting, these people are actually being quite compliant. It looks like they've taken a break from the beach to go and vote. But, you know, generally speaking, life gets in the way. And it was also a unique opportunity for us to get people to compare the different measurement tools, which we've never been able to do before because we've only done one at a time. So I'll play the video. It runs for about 4 minutes and I'll come back and wrap up.
But I'm a bit of a creature of habit. Pretty routine, work's routine, putting the radio on is quite routine.
It's kind of nice having the spontaneity of the radio, not having to think about what you want to listen to or play. You can just pick the radio station.
Every morning it's the same thing. Kyle and Jackie, I get to work, it's, you know, Smooth FM, and in the afternoon on my way home, it's 2GB.
And I listen to music on my phone, I listen to the radio in the car when I'm like driving to school.
just downloaded it and it just left it on. I left it on the whole time. I didn't turn it off or on.
I mean, I had the app on the whole time, so I didn't even think about it.
I think my phone is an extension of myself nowadays, and to know that there was something in my phone which I didn't necessarily trust felt kind of invasive.
My phone is important, but it's not that important. I don't want to have it sewn into my ear or anything like that. I like it and I like what it can do for me, but my phone we need to be separated. It's like like an old girlfriend. Sometimes you just got to be apart.
The app is annoying because when you're trying to text or play a game, when you're tapping at the top, I sometimes accidentally click the red bar and it goes straight to the app.
A few times when I was making personal phone calls, I decided to turn off the app because I felt uncomfortable with the fact that it was picking up what I was saying. I turned off the app because I was worried that it was using my mobile data and also chewing up my battery. And there were a few times when I was out during the day and I didn't have access to a charger and my phone was running low. So
When I'm listening to music through my headphones, I know the app isn't recording that.
I found the watch really easy. All you had to do with the watch was put it on to charge at night and then put it back on in the morning and maybe occasionally take it off, say when you were having a shower or something.
It's really good. It's like really high tech because when you're not looking at it, it turns off. When you're looking at it, it turns on.
I actually got complimented on the watch. One person at work, oh, that's a really nice watch.
My friends were all like, what's that? Does it record everything you say? And I was like, yes. And then they just started grabbing my wrist and yelling into the watch.
So doing dishes and stuff, and I didn't want to knock it over or anything, so I kept on pushing it up.
Sunday, I had to referee a whole lot of soccer games, so I didn't particularly want to wear a clunky watch while I was refereeing, so I put it in a bag.
I had a performance a few weeks ago and I couldn't wear it. You weren't allowed to wear any jewelry. So I think the watch and the diary together is a good solution because the watch doesn't capture everything that I do in my everyday life, but the diary does. If I don't have the watch on all the time, say I have to take it off for swimming and for sport and stuff, but if I have the diary, I can just fill it in at the end of the day and it'll have everything that I've done throughout the whole day.
By using both the diary and the app together, I think it would create a better picture.
I think that you need a mix of the app, watch and diary. Personally, I think the diary was the most accurate, followed by the watch, and then I guess the app, like when you're doing the diary and stuff, was like, okay, yeah, actually I do that often. So the watch was probably a little bit inconvenient, washing up, and that's maybe where the diary was quite good. Showers and all that sort of stuff. So, the most accurate for me was the diary. I think it was a little bit more concrete.
I'm glad he did remember to take it off before he went into the shower. I'm in the red now, so I'll quickly wrap up. But, you can see there how human beings, as much as we would love them to prioritise our study, life happens and, sometimes they can't wear these watches or have these apps running. And the point is, every time it comes off, it needs to come back on again. So it's another moment of compliance that needs to happen. It's not just remembering to put the watch on in the morning and to make sure the app is running in the morning. There can be multiple points of compliance. So just quickly wrapping up, acceptance, as I said, in the mini pilot was good. We got the confidence we needed that we can run the super pilot and that we'll get the sample sizes that we're planning. There are some things we learned regarding how to set this up properly, the kind of instructions we should give and how we position those instructions. And then finally, this is the roadmap that we're looking at the moment. So we're on the orange at the moment. So we've already done a lot of pre-work, looking at previous studies, talking to our global teams regarding what we should do, and that's how we arrived at this super pilot launch. We've done the mini pilot to make sure it's feasible. We're going to do an incentive concept test. We need to understand what the appropriate incentive is to do these 3 tasks. That's coming this quarter. And the next year, we will launch the super pilot in the first half of 2019, followed then by all the modelling work that will happen afterwards. That's it from me. It's our 5th and final year in our first term as the radio ratings provider, so I'd like to take this opportunity to thank my team, Deb, Jeremy, and everybody from GFK who've made the transition to eDiaries a success over the last 4 to 5 years. Thank you all.